The hard part today is it's not just porn sites. It's especially with kids, when we're talking on the 11-year-old world, they have access to YouTube, TikTok. There is access to soft porn. When I was in 8th grade, I was handed a magazine and I saw a woman with her top off. Well, I'm a little old and I still have that picture in my mind. It's not a pretty picture. She was standing in the Amazon. She had a grass skirt. She had a cigarette in her mouth. She was holding a spear. Nobody taught me at that age how to handle the images that I was going to see. And when a kid sees that, their mind takes a picture, they want to see more, it escalates, they get desensitized, and then they begin to act it out. If they don't want their child going down the same area that they have, they've got to have that conversation. That's how it is.
All right, Jim. So you and I both speak to thousands of dads, and I think we can all, like, you have your lane and I have mine, and we can speak to how dads can be better dads. But you know who really, I think laughs at us, and based on what you and I were talking about, is our own kids, because
Sure.
We're like, you do this for all these other people, and then you kind of do it really weird here. So and this topic, sex, and the talk sex, man, that could be definitely an awkward conversation.
Oh. I don't think I've ever had an unawkward conversation when I've talked to my own kids. I was telling you, just before we came on the podcast that, my daughter Christy, who's actually 40 now, okay, and she has opinions, and she had opinions when she was 10, and she has opinions now. But she goes, Dad thinks he did a good job talking to us about sex, and he could speak to thousands of kids. There was a season where I spoke to about 250,000 kids a year. Even where you're at in St. Louis, I would go to these conferences and whatnot. But she goes, but when Dad spoke to us, all girls, 3 girls, no hormones or drama, she said, Dad was awkward. His bald head would sweat, his ears would turn red, and he would stutter. And I just laughed. I'm like, well, that's kind of true, but it's your own kid. So it's different than me standing up in front of Promise Keepers, a men's movement where I spoke for years, and talking to them about it, because I wasn't looking at my own kid. I didn't have as much invested in the part of my own children. And plus, there's just words and topics and questions and whatnot that, it makes it awkward. And one of the reasons, Larry, is because our parents typically didn't talk to me, or at least my parents, they didn't talk to me. So especially my dad, that was like a taboo subject. So, as I got older in the teen years, there was no way I was going to ask my dad, because he wasn't necessarily safe. I mean, he'd talk to me about sports. He'd talk to me about my basketball. He'd talk to me about baseball. I played football. He'd talk to me about all that stuff, schoolwork even, but he never really talked to me about the sex and sexuality. So he wasn't my go-to. And today's kids, their go-to is the internet. The number one place they go is the internet. But part of that is too bad, because all research says that the more positive, value-centered sex education kids get from their parents, the less promiscuous and less confused they'll be. And we've got a whole generation of kids who are kind of confused about it. So yeah, we dads have to do that awkward thing. And hey, all dads aren't bald like me, but their head is going to sweat and their ears are going to turn red and they might stutter. Big deal. Do it anyway.
This conversation is so timely for me, because I haven't had this conversation. Well, I haven't had the jumping off conversation where it's like we're new to sex, but I've got 2 older boys, 19 and 17, and I've had the conversation with, it's actually an ongoing conversation with them, but with my 11-year-old, we're gearing up to have that conversation, right. the really in-depth one. And my wife, she leaves that one to me. She doesn't do it. And she's like, how are you going to handle it this time? And I'm like, if I can only remember it, how I completely face planted the first 2 times, maybe I could learn a few things. So to
that's
be
how
honest,
we learned. Face plant, look up, try something different. It's kind of how it goes. But
oh my gosh.
Right. And 11, by the way, is a good age. Let me just affirm you for that, because today's boy, and your youngest is a boy too?
All 4 boys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how I grew up in, with four brothers, or 4 of us. With 11-year-old, that's the perfect age, because by 10, they quite possibly, or at least statistics say, and research says that they've seen pornography. So you don't want that to be the front-loaded information for sex and sexuality. And because kids are seeing that, then they're talking about it at school or whatever. So, that's the good age to have those conversations. And you said it best with your older guys. It's not that you have one conversation. We dads can be okay about the one conversation, but actually I think you have, instead of one 100-minute conversation, you have hundreds of 1-minute conversations. And that's the best way to go. In fact, I know a dad who just took his kids to spring training. He has 2 sons, 12 and 13. And they were all excited about going to spring training. They got out of school. They live here in California where I live. They were, going to Arizona. So they mapped out who they were going to watch, what they were going to do. But in it, they also had conversations, went through the book that I just wrote called A Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity, went through the book, and they're like, hey, we thought we were going to spring training. We're good about that, but we're not sure we want to go through this book thing. And so the dad kind of pivoted and actually then did it in really small segments. And he said, you know what? It was awesome. He said, we had a lot of fun. We laughed like crazy. We ate terrible food. My wife would have died what I fed these kids. And then we talked about sexual integrity. And they're going to remember all of that stuff in a good way. Yay. Way to go, Dad.
Nice job, Dad.
Yeah.
Wait, let's back up for a second and talk about just the awkwardness that's this. Like I got to be honest, man, I'm in that season too, where I'm just like, I know I need to have this conversation with him.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't really remember how I had it with how I dove into this topic with my 2 older boys. And I don't even know why, to be honest, Jim, but like this time around, I'm a little overwhelmed and I'm a little nervous about it. And I think maybe I'm also taking in consideration the personality of my 11-year-old.
Sure.
He's super inquisitive, very curious, very detailed. So like, I guess maybe as I'm sort of clarifying this out loud, I'm also wondering, like, I'm really wondering, like, maybe one of the reasons I'm nervous is like, what kind of detailed questions is he going to come back with?
Exactly.
But like,
well,
can we start there with like, how do you take the awkwardness out of this? Or
no,
do you
know what? You don't take the awkwardness out. That's the thing. People want us to figure out, guys like me who write books on this stuff, they want me to take out the awkwardness for them. And I go, no. First chapter of the book that I wrote for kids is called Awkward. And you embrace the awkwardness and you kind of laugh about it. I love that you just said he's inquisitive and going to ask a lot of questions, because like with our girls at 11, and again, all girls, you've got boys. My wife, Kathy, takes them out. They spend the night at a cool hotel that had heated cookies, which was a big deal to them for some reason. Now, these are girls. They went to, they got a outfit and they went to kind of a nice dinner, and then she walked through some stuff. Well, Christy, totally inquisitive, my oldest, engaged, had the conversation. Kathy came back like radiant. She goes, this was so good. Becca, my middle child, kind of with an emphasis on middle, she goes, Mom, stop reading. We were reading some book, I wasn't there. And she goes, stop reading this. This is gross. I don't want you to tell me about this, Mom. So Kathy didn't know what to do, so she kept reading it. And Becca puts her fingers in her ear and goes, nah, 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 nah. I don't want to hear this. So Kathy calls me up and goes, so what do I do now? And I go, well, I don't think you keep reading, because obviously that didn't work. And then Heidi at 11, she goes, hey, you know how you took the other 2 girls and they got outfits? Her birthday's right around school, when school starts. She goes, hey, is there any way you could take me a little early? Because I need a new outfit. And I know all the stuff because my sister's already told me everything, but I'm good with you telling me that stuff, but I already know that stuff, but I just need a new outfit, Mom. So, all 3 of them did it differently. So I call this personally tailored discipleship. Each kid, you got to kind of, work it a little differently. And when they're inquisitive, let's say like a lot of dads go, I'm not going to have that conversation because I didn't do so good myself, or I'm still not doing good, or whatever. I think for dads, I always say this to dads. I always say, hey, look, you got to say, you don't give them all your dirty, if they go, well, what about you and Mom? Or what about you before? Or did you ever look at porn? Or, those kind of things. I think you say, hey, you don't tell them everything, but I think you just simply go, hey, I didn't do it always right. So I'm passionate about it even more for you because, I'm carrying some baggage into this thing. And, that affects, my relationship with your mom, and it affects, different things in my life. And I don't want it to affect you. So I'm anxious for you to have, a healthier view of this. And the only way we do it is we get through having some of these kind of conversations. Then the other thing I would say with 11-year-old is like do what Kathy did. There are books for 11-year-olds. So Kathy read a book. So the beauty of that was they weren't looking face to face. Kind of tough with a dad and a son. You're doing the knee to knee, face to face, and say, let's talk about masturbation today. What are you going to do? So instead, you're reading a book together, or you're watching a course, they have great courses out today. So, you're watching something together and you go, hey, what do you think about that? Or like I did with my girls, because I felt like I needed a dad part to this too. And I would say, I wouldn't ask them personal questions. I would say, hey, what are the kids thinking at school about? And then, fill in the blank, And that was a game changer for me, because they would just chat. Oh my gosh, there's, Cassie thinks this, and, Jason said this to me. I can't believe he said it. And all of a sudden now they're feeling more comfortable because they're not talking about themselves.
Right.
But they kind of are. What I
they
found
kind of
was,
are, but
yeah.
like being able to put the spotlight on maybe what the conversations are at school, like takes the spotlight off the kid, maybe provides a little bit more psychological safety.
Yeah. Hey, you're right. With Kathy and I, and we got this idea from a friend of ours, every 6 months, we would actually, we lived by the beach. So we just go down to the beach, we sit in our beach chairs, have a yellow notebook and say, what do we want to talk to our kids about when it comes to education, their faith, getting along with, others, whatever, and then sex education. And then for the next 6 months, we'd kind of look for I call it planned spontaneity, for us to kind of have those conversations. Periodically there'd be something we'd go, oh yeah, we want to talk to Christy about this. And then we'd be watching a show, a TV show. And Kathy would just hand me the remote to put pause. I go, well, I can remember one time we were watching the MTV Music Awards. Some of your listeners may not like that, but that was a great cultural thing for me to do with my girls as they got to be, the teenagers that your two boys are. And she just handed me the remote, and two women had just kissed. And so I took the remote and paused and go, what do you think about that? I got an eye roll. So I'm not saying they're like, Christy went, oh, this is the greatest thing. You're amazing, Dad. But I got an eye roll, and she goes, well, I think it's kind of gross. But she also said, but I think in the church, she was talking, and I didn't even mention the church, but she goes, in the church, I think they're a little harsh about this kind of stuff and a little mean. And I went, wow. So we talked more about how, as Christians, we as a family could approach, those kinds of things. But man, we had a great conversation, and it was all Kathy's, because I was going to go right past that. Jim, the dad, no way. I don't want to touch that. She hands me the remote. Great conversation. So it was those spontaneous conversations. That's why I'm so big on dads and their kids doing kind of the dates around. And guys, it's easy. It's food. You go get a breakfast burrito, and it's not always talking about that subject, but if you do that on a regular basis, stuff just comes up and you look for the inroad. So, that's, I think the spontaneous stuff is what really helps, but we got to be thinking about it, all the time. How am I going to talk about this, or what are the subjects? And like for your 11-year-old, a very good subject, even though nobody wants to bring this up, but a very good subject would be, looking at porn. And the point being that if we talk about it, a lot of dads say, well, if I talk about that, then my kids are going to be curious. Actually, it's just the opposite. We demystify certain things, as long as we're not preaching and lecturing, but we're having a heart-to-heart conversation. And even I talked to a dad a couple of weeks ago who I was speaking in Austin, and he came up to me and he said, so I really made a big mistake. My son was caught, looking at porn, and he's about 12. And so I took his computer, which I had paid for, and I broke it. I just put it over my knee and broke it. He goes, I was so upset on two levels. One, I was upset with my son. Two, I was upset with me. And three, it just cost me $2,000. He goes, my anger cost me. And I laughed at that. But he's what we talked to. He said, how do I frame that conversation? I said, I think you say, you know what, buddy, instead of freaking out like you did, I think you simply go, that's a false intimacy. Let's talk about real intimacy, and let's talk about how the master designer designs our sexuality and all that kind of stuff. Much better conversation now. So it's not that, it's this. So you're using even a negative experience to talk about a positive experience. And a lot of times that works. But again, if you don't get eye rolls, or if you don't get, you've got to be kidding me. And it depends on the kid, every one. One might engage, like I said, with with ours. Our middle child, like I said, who said, don't talk about it. She became she has a master's in clinical psych. So she now talks about it all the time, to people with all kinds of issues, but it was really uncomfortable for her. So we had to do a whole different conversation style than daughter number one. It's the same with our sons. I don't know if that makes you feel better about your 11-year-old or not.
Not yet. We're getting there though, Jim. Don't worry about it. So here's what I think has changed since in the past 7 years, since I started having these conversations with my older ones, is that, my 17 and 19-year-old, going back to 5th, 4th, and 3rd grade, there were really not many kids in his class that had phones. In fact, I don't remember hardly any. In fact, I don't even remember until it was like 6th or 7th grade that kids started coming around with phones. Right. Dude, now, now just a handful of years later, my 9-year-old is one of the few kids in his class. My 11-year-old too. My 11-year-old, I think, is the last one in his class not to have a phone, and they won't get phones until they go to high school.
Right. By the way to go. That's a big deal in our world at Homeward where we talk about that stuff. Good job.
Dude, it's mind blowing to me. Like there was I understand it for safety to a certain degree. We actually just got our kids not too terribly long ago what's called the Bark Watch, which is a lot like the Apple Watch, but they can only text on it, and you can only approve for certain friends, and they have no access to the internet or anything like that. But it's like a way to keep a track on their location, and all they can really do is like text and call on it. Right. But Jim, I have that fear too, because like my son is the only one, like my 11-year-old, I swear, dude, he's the only one in his class that doesn't have a phone. Yeah. And before having a conversation with him, that is my fear of like, what if I say something to him, I have this talk with him, and then he sees that, his buddy has his phone, be like, hey, my dad told me about this. Like, I'm worried about that. How do I go about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I give you I work for Homeward, which is family ministry. So I give you the, Homeward Dad of the Day award because we make a mistake by allowing our kids to be connected to the internet too early. And, if I was that age and some kid said to me, hey, do you want to see on YouTube, who named the name, Miley Cyrus with her top off? Yeah, I'll do that. Even if I was, brought up with strong morals and values and all that. I mean, you're just going to do that. So to keep them away from that, it's a privilege. And so I say to parents, and the Bark Watch is a great idea. I haven't used that, and I'm going to steal your idea. But, I'll say, give them a family phone for protection if you need to, because they're going someplace, but it's not their phone and it's not connected to the web. You can text. That's pretty much it, right? Or call. And I think that's the kind of thing you do. And then you see how they're doing. So if they have responsibility, then you begin to give them more and more. But yeah, you're right. I mean, my 9-year-old grandson, James, he says he's the only one in his class that doesn't have a phone. And I don't think that's probably true. I think there's a couple of kids who probably don't, but but I also laugh because grandma, my wife, grandma goes, hey, James, there's something wrong with my phone. Can you fix it? The kid is 9 and he already knows, and he doesn't even own a phone, but he has obviously, and he's kind of that kind of kid anyway, but he has access to his parents. He goes, oh yeah, you just got to do the my God. Who is this? He sent me.
Isn't that crazy?
He texted me from my daughter's phone these pictures of turtles, so funny and so cute. And so it just didn't feel like my daughter sending me those things, right? So I go, Christy, is this from you? And she writes back, no, James sent those to you. So yeah, you're right. But again, I mean, when you look at like Bill Gates, this is so long ago, he didn't give his kids, phone or internet access until they were in high school. And actually the same with Steve Jobs. So what do they know that we don't? What are we doing with this? So we have to be I think it's so key that we create a media safe home, and don't expect your kids to go, hey, you're awesome. Expect them to go, everybody else has one. Say, well, I'm sorry. And I know how you feel. And if I was your age, I might feel the same way. But nevertheless, here's how we do it at our house. And, you don't have to be mean about it. You just simply go, that's how we do it. So.
Yeah. How do we have that conversation though? Like I want to have a preempted conversation with like, listen, I want to warn him. Like I've already had this conversation with him to some degree, but not nearly as in depth as I want to. The other night we were having a conversation. I said, hey, you and I are going to start talking about like what it means to be a young man. And we're going to start talking about puberty, and we're going to start talking about sex, and we're talking about that kind of thing. And I was like, one thing I want to ask you though, is I know you're the only young man in your group that doesn't have a phone. when you've had sleepovers and that kind of thing, or you've been over to somebody else's house, has anyone ever shown you something on a phone that you were just like, that maybe was kind of sexual in nature, and you're like, I have no idea what I'm even looking at or what's going on here? And he's like, no, not yet. And I'm like, you even said not yet. And I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, good. I hope to God I didn't just give you a question to go ask your friends now. Yeah. Right. Like that was what was going through my mind. Yeah. So what's a good conversation to have where you're trying to have this conversation with your kid, but you don't want him to be the instigator of the group of like, hey, let's go search this stuff up.
No, I think it's good. I think, it's funny. We use the word role play on this. And the funny thing about role play, you don't sit with your kid and go, okay, let's role play. If a kid hands you pot, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? I mean, I don't think you make it really awkward, but say, hey, buddy, if that happens, how would you handle it? And then hear what he would say. And then you say, here's how, you're going to tweak whatever he said. You're not, he might say a better answer than you would. Because
it's true.
Honestly, it's crazy how they are. But at the same time, he may not. And so, another way of looking at that is this. And then, hey, by the way, when you see this, your mind takes a picture and it just stays in your mind. And then you start talking about some of the effects of what they might see. And, that's really preemptive. It's a great way to have that conversation. Does that mean that they're never going to go, yeah, I want to go see, let's look at Miley Cyrus or whoever, see what I'm saying? And the hard part today is it's not just porn sites. It's especially with kids when we're talking on the 11-year-old world, it's, they have access to YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, all of that has. By no means am I calling those porn sites, but I am saying there is access to soft porn. When I was in 8th grade, I was handed a magazine that was actually at our house, and I saw a woman with her top off, and people would go, "Oh, he was looking at Playboy." No, it was National Geographic. Well, I'm a little old, and I still have that picture in my mind. It's not a pretty picture. She was standing in the Amazon. She had a grass skirt. She had a cigarette in her mouth. She was holding a spear. But the point being is she also was topless. And, that was like a free look for me that I could keep that book or that magazine on my bedstand. And I'll admit there was a few times I looked at that. Okay. Well, that's what's going to happen sometimes even with our kids. They have a natural curiosity. So, but again, nobody taught me at that age how to handle the images that I was going to see. And today's images are so different than the images that were even available for somebody like you when you were that age. The images they're just so much more available. And frankly, what happens is when a kid sees that, their mind takes a picture, they want to see more. It escalates, they get desensitized, and then they begin to act it out. And you want to actually help them understand what that process is, what I would call the escalation of pornography. The reason I say that is because when you understand you're in the middle of it, like I used to speak to students, and I used to always speak at all the red ribbon things, and I'd kind of freak people out. I'd try to freak them out. If you're drinking and driving, you could die, and here's people who have died and blah, blah, blah. That never worked. It was more, hey, there's a biological predisposition toward alcoholism. And because my dad was an alcoholic, there's a greater chance that I'm going to be an alcoholic. So if you can drink a couple of beers and you're not buzzed, you probably are a budding alcoholic. Whoa, that just said to the ninth grader or the 10th grader, if everybody else was drinking and I could really handle mine, I thought that was cool, but maybe that's not as cool because maybe I'm a budding alcoholic. I'm going to become like my dad or my uncle or my grandpa or whatever, or my mom. So now you're doing some teaching in the midst of that.
Can we talk about this? Because I want to talk. I have never thought about it that way because, dude, I'm almost 50 years old, and I still remember images of naked women that I saw in Playboy's, National Geographic, Penthouse. Sure. I still remember even them specifically. Yeah. And it's interesting. I can't really remember. I remember the first ones. I can't remember too many in between. But I do remember images. But I think that is a very real thing for a young man, right? When they see it, they're like, oh my gosh, and now it's in here. It's I want more of that.
Yes.
And I think it's important to have a conversation around maybe normalizing why you want more of that. Yeah. Is that pretty real?
Yes. No, okay. I think it's really good. That's why I kind of went through what I call the 5 stages real quick. Yeah. But the second stage is I want more. And kind of frankly, that's the beginning of an addiction stage where you're like, man, I'd like to see some more of that. So a couple things happened during that time when you saw that, when I saw my National Geographic thing, is, I'll be nerdy for a minute on the brain, but there's some dopamine, which is a pleasure hormone. And that same pleasure hormone, when a man and a woman are physically intimate, that same pleasure hormone drops and gives you pleasure when you see something like that. So you had a better feeling at looking at your National Geographic or whatever else, Playboys, whatever, compared to, if you had a really cool soda, or something else. So the drop is a stronger drop. So not only does it affect, this is what kids need to understand sometimes. They need to understand that, no, if that happens, there will be pleasure. Just admit it. Yeah. I say to kids, sex is fun. That doesn't mean that, you have sex when you're not married, but you got to hear that it is fun, because if they hear us saying it's dirty, rotten, horrible, sinful, terrible, and save it for the one you love until you get married, and then they have some kind of a pleasure, they're going to go, these people are lying. This is great, right? So I think it's important for us to say, no, there is this drop that happens. There's this thing, but let me tell you why it's not good for us, because it can be addictive. We then begin to look at the opposite sex as a sex object more than we do. In the book on A Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity, I'm teaching kids to learn radical respect. How do you radically respect someone? And, that takes discipline.
Can you talk to me about that though? Like, cause I think I agree with you 100%. The thing that I do remember having this conversation with the older ones about like not viewing, women as objects and that kind of thing. Yeah. But I got to be honest, like I trip over my own shoes on that one. And like, okay, like how do I even explain this?
Yeah, it's partly discipline. The Bible even says discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness, and guys get discipline better sometimes than some. And so, the discipline of literally making a commitment to turn your eyes. The Bible, again, it's in the book of Psalms 119:37, I think. It says, turn your eyes from worthless things. Renew your mind. I always say the greatest sex organ is not your private parts. It's your mind. And so saying that to kids gives them an understanding, that they're doing, that literally they're kind of playing with fire. But also they need a roadmap and a guide. And that's why when dads have that conversation, doesn't mean that the kids aren't going to, if they do see it, it's not like they're going to go, oh, wow, I am looking at her only as a sex object. I never want to see that again. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that then they know, and they have to check in their head. And that's for them for the rest of their life. Like you say, at your age, you're still having to do that. At my age, I'm still having to do that. I live on the beach here in Southern California. And I surf. So, what I see and, it's like, seriously, I need to have the discipline to turn my head. And I've been happily married to Kathy for all these years. But my point being, it's still going to do that. So we need to learn the discipline. Well, we've got to teach our kids those skills. It talks about training our kids. We talk about training when it comes to sports, talk about training when it comes to some school stuff. But, we have to train them to, have a healthy sexual integrity about them. And that's not easy. No way. 4 steps forward, 2 steps backwards. And, you just kind of keep going in that direction.
Speaking of training, I think that this is a good topic that we talk about. So like, I don't masturbate. I don't look at porn. I haven't for years. My view of it is I want all that energy to go towards my wife. Mm-hmm. Like that's just the way it wasn't always that way. I've struggled with porn for years, and got away from it. And it's amazing. And I'll tell you, it's so amazing that that's the message I want to share with my kids. They're obviously not there yet, but like, right. I think one of the coolest things about monogamy, and not looking at porn and not masturbating and all that is you get to save all of that energy for your wife. Yeah. But that's not easy. That's training. Like that's discipline a lot too. And it's
training
not
and discipline.
Yeah, but it's worth it. How would you go about, or maybe that's not even a discussion for young men. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think it is a good conversation. Does that mean that just because you had one conversation about it, that everything's going to be okay? Not necessarily, but it is a process. You had to learn that process. Now you learned that, you might have known some of this earlier, but you learned that process by, taking a stumble or two. So we keep that in front of them. I think that's really key for us to have those kinds of conversations. Early on, even when they're in the height of, temptation, if you would, your older boys, they're right in that height. I mean, my goodness, that's the story. I mean, the comedians that they, watch or listen to, the people that you see within pop culture. I mean, it's now almost, porn is accepted as, of course, everybody does that.
It's like every day. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way though, but you can teach them the other way and why the other way is better. And, sometimes you'll have an amazing conversation. Other times you won't. That's how it is. But that's how it is with kids with anything, So I think we just continue to teach them and train them, in the right ways. And, they'll get it younger. I mean, I think there's some students out there right now, this generation, Gen Z, which is really unique because Gen Z, they are, twice as many atheists. And yet at the same time, there's some amazing Gen Z people and they're kind of getting some of this and they're getting it at a younger age. Some of this, I wish I had those conversations when I was 16 and 17. It was never brought up. So yeah, we have those kind of conversations. And I find even with our daughters are now in their 30s. Christy just turned 40. But I just kind of go, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're having this conversation now. They're married and, on and on, but they feel comfortable still talking with us about it because we made it that way for them at an earlier age. I'm not saying we did it all perfect, but I'm just saying, man, it's paying some good dividends right now.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, your family is quite frankly where you should be able to have any conversation.
Yeah.
And that's, I think the more we make things like this taboo or we can't talk about it or awkward, that probably that's exactly what's going to happen. Right. Right.
Well, I mean, we have trouble talking with our spouses about it. It's funny, you being in the St. Louis area. I used to do a marriage conference every year in St. Louis.
Oh, really?
And I remember having a conversation with somebody because I was talking about developing sexual intimacy for couples. And Homeward has our biggest event this weekend on refreshing your marriage. And I'll talk about it again, rekindling romance. But one of the things I say about developing sexual intimacy is you got to be willing to talk about sexual intimacy with your spouse because that's really intimate. There are people, I remember in St. Louis, a guy came up to me and he goes, I've never had one conversation with my wife about sex that was meaningful. We talk about it kind of peripheral and I kind of flirt with her and she flirts with me, but we don't talk about it. So we don't have an intimate relationship because we don't have that conversation. Well, that was because I said, well, how much of that did you have with your parents? None, zero. How much did she have? Is that none, zero? So even talking about it is helpful. Because again, your kids are miles ahead of other people because, you've had some of these intimate conversations. Talking about sex is intimate. Intimate just means connection. It doesn't mean, we think of intimate, guys especially, we think of intimacy as like physical intimately. No. Intimate means to be connected. So to be connected with your boys on this or girls, by the way, is a really, cool thing for you, but it's a really cool thing for them too. Because they may go through life not having those kind of conversations if they don't get it from their parents. So that's why I'm kind of circling back around to say, dads have to figure out how to have those kind of conversations with their sons and daughters. It's a different kind of a conversation. I'd mentioned that Kathy just took the girls away at 11. I took them away at 16 and kind of did the same thing. We had a nice meal and we stayed someplace. They could stay wherever they wanted in the kind of the SoCal area. So one wanted to be San Diego, one wanted Palm Springs, one wanted Hollywood. We went. We had food, we had fun, we laughed, went to a movie, but we also had a dad conversation. But not just all dad talking, more them, talking too. And by that time at 16, they felt a little more comfortable in their own shoes. So they all had some thoughts and questions about guys. What do guys think about this? That kind of a thing. Good. Yay.
So they asked you that?
Yeah. But
That's
they did.
amazing.
I mean, they didn't I'm thinking back to the conversation that I had with my youngest. I mean, it wasn't like she didn't ask the questions that I was hoping for. I wanted deep, whatever. But she was like, guys are kind of gross, Dad. They, blah, blah, blah. Then she started talking and I went, yeah, well, they kind of are. And here, what do you think about this? And then we dialogued. But that you can't just show up at a certain time and expect them to dialogue if you've never had the conversation. So it goes back to those 1 minute conversations. I tell people start having your sex education when kids are 3 to 5. And it's not, read a book. Homeward, we have books on 3 to 5, 6 to 9, and then 10, and on up. And, now they feel more comfortable. And it's funny. My daughter, Christy, I don't know why I'm bagging on her today, but they'd moved to Texas and she calls me and she goes, James was about 4. She goes, Dad, James has all these questions. Don't you have a book? I go, yeah. God made your body. She goes, well, send it to me. So I sent it to her. I'm there about 2 weeks later. And I hug Christy. I see the kids, hug the kids. I love her husband, Steve. And then Christy goes, hey, Steve, where's that book that Dad sent? Dad, here's the book. Go read it to James. And I go, wait, you didn't read it to James? She goes, oh, no, that's your job, Dad. Well, what's hilarious about it? And so I'm laughing because I'm going, wait, my own daughter didn't even, want to read the book. And it's like God made boys and God made girls and God made your eyes. What color are your eyes? And, it's a simple thing. But for her, it was like, okay, that's your job. Guess what? James and I still have conversations about certain things that he feels totally comfortable talking to me about. I think it's because I was safe and I would read him those books. Christy has now read the books and Steve too. Steve doing it with kind of like, oh man, my parents never talked to me about this. Well, Steve, it's time, buddy. You got a 9-year-old boy. You start talking.
It's time to talk. Yeah. Do you recommend maybe doing some sort of shared activity before having conversations like this to just sort of break the ice, get that connection going?
I like that. I feel like around my girls too, it's funny because I said this about boys earlier, but around my girls, I found that I could go, like I went to breakfast every week with Christy right before school. So she would get up early for, A's Burgers breakfast burrito, not good for health, but an amazing burrito here. And when you said you come to Dana Point sometimes, you'll have to try the breakfast burrito. But, around that, I would say, almost half the time we had a good conversation about something. The other half was she was talking about snowboarding and she talked about what she was doing at school and all that. It was great, but I'm like, oh man, I want to move to something deep. So you have to put in a lot of time of just, talking about whatever their deal is and listening, because listening is the language of love. And sometimes dads don't listen well. Dads want to talk. And as dads, we want to be people who can also listen and pick up, but sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And if you're going to have an agenda, sometimes when you do that, you go, hey, I just got a little agenda. I only want to ask I want to ask you this question about, I've been thinking about it. What do you think? But I did that around food a lot. But Heidi, not so much. Heidi would want to, we live at the beach. So she would want to go, hey, let's go for a walk on the beach, Dad. We want to take the dog and we'll go to, for a walk on the beach. Okay, awesome. Let's do it. So it doesn't have to be super big stuff, but like when I'm picking up the grandkids today, which I hardly ever get to do. Kathy's the fully engaged grandma who gets to do that. I don't. And I'm picking up the grandkids. The first stop is Brugger's ice cream because it's great ice cream. And, it's going to be one of those kind of things where I'll go, okay, what do you want? What do you want? Okay, well, maybe I will have something. And then probably not tell my wife that I had that ice cream because I'm trying to lose weight. I've lost 9 pounds. So.
Nice job. Congratulations.
Yeah, so I use the kid, but you know what? I'll get them to do their homework that way. I mean, they have some homework ahead of time, and Kathy's got an appointment. They'll get picked up about 4:30, and I will have them fed with ice cream on their face and their school outfits, and I will have them with homework because that's, I've got an agenda. I want their homework, but I also want to have some fun with them.
That is Grandpa of the Year right there.
Oh, I'm telling you.
Ice cream
there's
and
the
homework.
Line, Larry. Yeah. There's the line that you go, Grandpa, can I have a cookie? Well, what's the rule? Well, I can't have a cookie before dinner. No, that's Grandma's rule. Grandpa's rule is get me a cookie too. And so you get to.
Oh my God, that's great.
I want to be the party. I had a grandma like that. I want to be the party time grandpa with these guys. I want to be that. Yeah. That fun. But to do that, you also have to, you have to hold them accountable. But to do that, I find that if I'm that if I'm that way, now I'm talking, and I think the same kind of thing can happen with parents. But if you do that, you actually earn the right to be heard. When I was at Princeton in grad school, I was the area director for Mid-New Jersey Young Life. And we had a thing called earn the right to be heard. So you had to earn the right to ever talk to the kids who were in our Young Life clubs. Well, that's the same with our own children. You have to earn the right. Sometimes you earn the right by eating ice cream or eating junk food, or again, I'm not suggesting that that's all we do, but playing together. I mean, play opens up a closed spirit. So we're going off on that question that you ask about, do you do other things? Well, yeah, you play together. You have serious fun together. When you do that, play is what opens up a closed spirit. Play builds traditions. Play, does so much to a relationship. And so we find, what is their form of play? What do they like to do? And again, you could play Monopoly, or you could go kick a soccer ball, but I'm talking about just what do they like to do? What engage with, laugh together. That's how you do it.
I love that, man. Well, I want to switch gears just a little bit, move from the topic of talking to our kids to just sexual integrity of just men in general. I have found I've got several clients, and we talk about these things very, very openly in our community, and guys will tell you, they're just like, it's really hard for me to have a conversation around keeping my kids away from porn when I struggle with it myself.
Yeah.
So we have that a lot, but I think unfortunately what I have seen, and maybe you've seen it as well, is maybe because of this easy access to porn that wasn't there 20, 30 years ago. Now men, I get the feeling that men are having less conversations with their kids around this because maybe they don't even feel like they're worthy to have them because they're struggling with it. Yeah. Is there truth to that?
Yeah, no, there's totally truth to that.
Okay.
And I was talking to a dad. Homeward, we are the largest supplier of parenting seminars in the U.S. So we do stuff on teaching your children healthy sexuality and sexual integrity. We do stuff on creating a media safe home, all those kind of things. And so we always have this conversation. And a man will say this to me, I'd really like to talk to my kids, but I'm still struggling. And I say, first of all, you're partly there because you said you're still struggling with it. So there is hope, there is help, there's a plan, and you're going to have to work that plan. But you could do a couple of things depending on the age of your son or daughter. Typically with men, it's a son. But you could work this thing together. And this one guy I was talking to who actually goes to my church, and he said he had heard me say this, and I just think it's the best idea, and I never remember saying this. So I think I'm getting credit for something I didn't say. But he goes, with his son, who is 22, he said, we see each other about once a week, and if we give each other a high five, it means we were, sober for the week. If we do a low, either one of us put our hands out low, and it's a low five, then we need to have a conversation because we screwed up. And he goes, and to me, that's amazing because that's brutally honest with your own child. But I love that idea because he's working on it with his son and they're both making progress. Okay. And when people come to us and talk about, men talk about, sex addictions or pornography or, whatever. A lot of times we say, there's a plan. You're going to have to work the plan just like you work it if you were an alcoholic. You're an addict. You're going to have accountability. You're going to have to be in a relationship where you're brutally honest with at least someone. It doesn't typically it's not typically your son. But yeah, people can be freed. People can have that experience, but they also have to be able to say, if they don't want their child going down the same role, the same area that they have, they've got to have that conversation. Just how it is.
So you said that this man's son is older. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I don't know that would work with a.
I can't imagine that'd be better for with young guys. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't even know that that's, and I'm not telling every man that they have to have that conversation with their son about their own struggles. I think they can say, hey, this has not been perfect for me. So back to what I was saying, I'm passionate about it because I know it, it can hurt people. And, I wasn't always perfect, or I'm not always perfect, whatever you want to say. I don't think you have to share your every war story and all your dirty underwear with your kids. That's not what you have to do. I think some parents do that, and that's fine if that's how they feel. But if they don't, I think they can still help their kids make right and wise decisions about sexuality or about anything else.
I think for them, I think a lot of kids out there probably think that their parents don't probably struggle with this. It's like the unspoken thing. Me and my oldest son, we've talked about this, and this was a while ago. This was a couple of years ago, probably when he was like 17. We had conversations around porn, and I even told him, I was like, dude, I struggle with this, and he looked at me like I had three heads. He's like, what? I was like, yeah. He's like, wait, seriously? I'm like, yeah. I was like, I don't know. I gotta be honest, man. I don't know many guys who don't. I was like, I don't partake in that anymore. I was like, but I was dead honest with him. I was like, I'm not going to say that it's not tempting every now and again. Mm-hmm. I was like, especially when I was like, I don't know about you. And I asked my son this. I was like, I tend to get most tempted when I'm stressed.
Yeah.
And I just want to not think about what's going on. He looked at me, he's like, that's when I am most tempted. I was like, well, that's when most men are most tempted.
Sure.
I was like, just because I'm your dad and I'm almost 50 years old, that doesn't mean like I don't ever go through like human things. I was like, but the interesting thing about that, I'm not going to lie, I had a ton of fear of sharing that with him before I said it. But then after I said it, for our relationship anyway, I'm not saying this is right for everybody, but for our relationship, it made me a more relatable go-to for him. And he talks to me about it all the time now.
Yeah, no, totally.
And he has for a long time.
No, it's great fathering. What you did is great fathering. Plus, you have a victory in this, and the victory is it's always a process. So you could crash tomorrow, but you've had a victory. So a lot of dads, or even ones who have had victories through this process, they go, if I bring that up, then they're going to go, well, it's okay. So all through my 20, the kid's thinking, all my 20s, I'll do what dad did, and then I'll try to get. That's not the case. They feel now safe having a conversation with you. They see that your way is better than either what they're doing or what you did. So no, again, your authenticity speaks loudly. There's a proverb that says, the man of integrity walks securely. And what I say is the man of integrity who walks securely, I'm not trying to add to the Bible here, but the man of integrity who walks securely will have kids who walk securely. So now he's secure in having a conversation with you because you were willing to be authentic with him. Beautiful. Great. And I realize everybody can't do that. And some, where we started this is you'd said, what about the guy who's still struggling with it too? Well, yeah, that's harder. But I think some dads can be motivated. I saw this when I spoke for Promise Keepers in the, in another generation, if you would. But a lot of dads would be motivated to make change, not for themselves, but for their sons or their daughters. Yeah, good. It's whatever helps you make a better decision. So if a dad is like, man, I want to have this conversation with my kid, but I'm screwing up, I'm going to take that step. Just talk to somebody within the last month. This is on alcoholism, but he was an alcoholic. His son was an alcoholic. He tried to help his son get some help. And finally he said, let's go together. They went into in-treatment together. That's amazing. But guess what? That's one of the strongest bonds that they have right now, is that just their willingness to say, we need help. And the son came because the dad said, let's go.
Wow.
Not a great
Talk
story.
about taking the lead.
Whoa, I know. And I was thinking about taking the cost. I don't know if he had good insurance or not, but bad. That's an expensive venture to do. They did 28 days in a rehab.
Yeah, I've seen some of the prices for those things, and man,
yeah,
it's like a 1 year salary for a lot of people.
Yeah,
to go to one of those.
I was so impressed with the dad saying, let's do this together. Well, what? I think his motivation was more, I don't want my son to experience what I've experienced over, 20 years of, lack of sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing too is I think it steals. I've talked about this with my own kids, is that, yes, there's an integrity thing. Yes. For a lot of us, me included, there's a faith-based thing in there, but like, there's also a productivity and wasted time and energy, like I really think about like what else could be done or what good could be put into the world if I wasn't spending time doing this. Right. There's a lot of things that we can do that's very, very positive if we didn't just give in to our vices.
That's whatever it is, we're talking about sexual integrity, but with whatever it is, that's how we're going to finish well. I mean, you're saying that you're almost 50. And I know when we start talking about finishing well, it sounds like old people, but the youngest of youngest should be able to be going, how can I finish well? Well, you do that by understanding that, the world could be changed by by changing the trajectory. Kathy and I we were raised in very dysfunctional families. My dad was an alcoholic. My grandpa on my mom's side, Kathy's family was just a little crazy. So we get married thinking it's going to be great. We're youth pastors. We're going to be youth pastors. And this is going to be great. Our first year was a 1-year argument in our marriage. And we decided that we would either recover or repeat the sins of previous generations. And we decided we would recover. Best decision we could make, hardest decision we could make. So really a great decision for us to recover. But now, so Becca, my middle, she's married to kind of a rock star guy. And so they had their wedding in Italy, and we're at this villa and it's amazing. And Kathy and I are sitting at the pool overlooking the ocean. And I put my arm around her and I said, wow, look at this. Our families were getting along. Our kids were great. Our kids have the faith that we found when we were in high school. And I went, you know what? It's worth it. So we think we've changed the trajectory, at least for the family. Now, every kid has to make a decision, but we've changed that trajectory. It's possible. But, significance in a well-lived life is never accidental. And so that's important for dads to hear that you want your kids to make wise decisions. Well, then it's not going to be an accident. They're not just going to do that by circumstance and chance. So yeah, it means suck it up, take the 11-year-old on a, little outing and go to the St. Louis Cardinals game, and in the middle of it, the game afterwards, not during the game, I hope, but before or after, you had a little conversation about something that was of greater significance than, watching the game.
I love that, man. Your daughter's married to a rock star, like a rock star?
Rock star.
Who is it?
I can't say it.
You can't say it?
No. Although what was really cool is what we get from him is he's such a great. He was a lead guitar player of a band that fronted for U2 and things like that. And then last summer, the Beach Boys, who are my generation, there we go. They're playing at the Hollywood Bowling, and we get a call from my daughter and go, hey, do you guys want some great seats at the Beach Boys? Her husband was playing. So the Beach Boys are like old. I mean, I'm young compared to them. They kind of like shuffled on. So the great guitar playing and the great falsetto that they sing, that's not them. That's these younger guys behind them, right? So we were loving it. So we got to see Mumford & Sons, Beach Boys. We just see some great, music because he also plays in that kind of world. So anyway, but because of it's also a weird world. I mean, they live in Silver Lake in LA, and it's just it's a hard world to stay grounded in. It's a hard world. They met at a Christian school. That band blew up while he was in school in college, and so he left. He was one of two that continued and got a college degree on buses, and I mean, you can only imagine what their life was like. A lot of European work, but anyway, so they kind of re-met and re-engaged. He was based in New York. She was working in New York. So, but they live that life, and we kind of live it in some ways because that's the world. I mean, if you would have seen the people who came to their wedding in Italy, it's like, our little family that was kind of looks normal or whatever. And then there's all these guys who just look different, not bad, but just, I mean, they look awesome. I want to be like them when I grow up, I call them the cool kids, and I know them all. Yeah, so I kind of call them I'm Becca's dad, but I call them the cool kids. They're the cool kids.
That is so cool, man. That is really, really cool. I've had a few rock stars on the podcast. I had Chris Daughtry, Nikki Sixx came on the podcast from Motley Crue, and those guys are fascinating to talk to. Like they're just the life that they live is very
it's an
different.
Interesting life, and yet it's also hard to be grounded. Yeah, I just listened to an interview by Chris Pratt, who is a pretty strong Christian, and really has a deepened faith. He's married to Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter, and so he's an A-lister, but it's. What is the number one thing? He wants, when you die, what are you interested in? You're interested in a right relationship with God. You're interested in a right relationship with your family. Well, that's what he's focused on. And at the same time, the amount of temptations that probably come his way. I can't speak for him. I don't know who he is. My daughter actually goes to a church that they go to. But it's fascinating to just hear his deep love for his kids, his deep love for his wife, his, trying to juggle faith and be gone a bunch of time because you're on some set someplace else or whatever. It does work. I mean, I live close enough to the LA market where I know some of these people who are, well known either in the music or the, more in actor type things. And man, the Christian crowd, they can do it, but it's not easy.
It's not easy for sure. Yeah, I hear you, man. I've gotten to be good friends with a lot of people I've had on the podcast, and same thing as you, kind of like, you can't really name names, but like, that lifestyle and how challenging it can be. But yeah, I get it. Well, I want to make sure all the guys can connect with you, and how many different books do you have on this topic, and where can we find them?
Yeah. Well, I've been writing for a long time. They can find them on Amazon, but they can also find it at Homeword, HOMEWORD.com. And since we've been talking about sex and sexuality today, we've got 3 books for kids. So we've got a book for 3 to 5 year olds that parents read with their kids. It's a cute little book. It has pictures and all that kind of fun stuff. Not gross pictures, but cute pictures of babies with curly hair and babies with straight hair and that kind of stuff. And then the other one is on how God makes babies, and it's kind of like, what's the purpose of a family, and it kind of walks through that, and that's 6 to 9 year olds. So 6 to 9 year olds ask a lot of questions. And then this brand new book called A Student's Guide to Sexual Integrity. I truly wanted to change the narrative and make it more user-friendly. I wanted to make it guy-friendly, to be honest, because a lot of stuff, even like when I do marriage conferences, with my background with Promise Keepers, I want I want marriage conferences to be guy-friendly. A lot of marriage conferences aren't. They're kind of touchy-feely, and the women like them, but the guys are like, oh man, give me a break. So those books, and then we have a book called Teaching Your Children Healthy Sexuality, is a little bit like what we've been talking about. Parents can read that kind of stuff. But lots of books on parenting, marriage. Homeward, where I work, has four values: strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. And so all of our content runs through that. I've got a podcast. I'm sitting in our podcast studio today. I've got a podcast, Homeward with Jim Burns, that they can always also, I do what you do. I mean, I love this job because I interview the finest people on, either marriage or parenting typically. And I'm like blown away. I'm taking notes from them. I learn so much. I'll be going one direction and I go, wait, I've got 3 questions I just want to ask personally. So I use them as my therapist or my coach or whatever. So I love the podcast. It's awesome. I've only been doing it for a year, but I had a radio background, so I was doing radio for some time. So I used to do the interviews anyway. So I'm back, loving it.
I'm the same as you. I love the podcast because I always look at it as it's like being in the front row of the classroom.
Yeah.
And being able to ask all the questions for the people, who don't get a chance to ask.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job.
Thanks.
I've listened in and I just go, wow, he's really good. You're really good at what you do.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And back at you. I mean, like I have loved talking about this topic. Like I said, I love the fact that you drop in, like the fact that you ask, 2 or 3 questions personally, because if I'm being like really selfish here, I'm like, I really want to talk to Jim because I'm about ready to have this conversation with my 11-year-old. Exactly. I need some guardrails again. I need some good reminders, and you definitely delivered. So I appreciate you, man.
Oh, that's so funny. It's so awesome. I will do that sometimes on marriage. I'll have a thing, and then I come home and I go, Kathy didn't hear the conversation. I go, hey, I have 3 good ideas that we could do. I kind of now put it in the marriage, and she's like, oh, you've been on a podcast talking about marriage, right? So yeah, that's where we get our chance. There's a pastor, well-known pastor named Andy Stanley, and I just was out there. I have a book called Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. It's kind of the most popular book I've got.
Oh my gosh, what a great title.
Yeah. And it's been a bestseller on Amazon for some time. And so Andy I speak, and then they could text questions. So he's looking at the questions. He goes, okay, the first 2 are mine and Sandra's. And he just goes in, and they were like tough questions with his kids. But I love that because when you're asking the question, you get to lead the way it goes. So that's the good thing about podcasts. Thus we digress.
Yeah, man. I agree. I love that aspect about podcasting. Yeah. And, well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes for you, for Jim. Go to thedadedge.com/Jim 536 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/536 for this show. Jim, I know fully well that this podcast will help men not only talk to their kids, but also give us some things to think about as it relates to our own sexual integrity. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet, brother.
And love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Same. Back at you, my friend.
Okay. Take care.